Okay, so I just got a direct message that we're all good to go. First thing, welcome to all of you. It's good to see you all. It's good to see some of you that I talk to fairly frequently as well. So first thing, before I start off, those of you who don't know me, my name is JD Swanson. I'm a program director in the National Science Foundation and EPSCoR. And I've been really working, I'm also the current program lead for the EPSCoR RII program. And so what I'm hoping to do is talk with you today just to provide a little bit of clarity. I'll go through a presentation hopefully fairly quickly and leave a ton of time for questions for you all. But I really want to just go through it and talk about it, as some of you have seen the program before and seen these, others of you have not. And so there's going to be elements that hopefully add clarity, as I've given this presentation multiple times, that provide additional clarity to many of the discussions that we've had with you all over the course of the last few months. So I'm just going to share my slides at this point. And again, save your questions, add them to the chat. We'll go through them. I can be here certainly longer than the 2 p.m. end if you need, but just let me know, right? So I'm going to share my screen at this point. Desktop number 2, share. Great. Okay, so what we're here today, this is part 2 of a 2-parter graciously provided by Oklahoma to really go through and talk about ERISE and EPSCoR, excuse me. There we go. So I really appreciate them for hosting this event. And I'm really excited to talk about these programs with you and really help you figure out what's best for your jurisdiction as you're developing through and really thinking about what the opportunities that these programs really provide. And EPSCoR is really, I think it's it might be just Dunning-Kruger sort of talking here, but I think it's really a great opportunity, and unlike any other NSF program, to be able to develop to your state's fundamental research needs in real time in a project. And I think that's really unheard of and something really new through the National Science Foundation that you'll be excited about. So just a little bit of background. We really created these 2 programs, both ERISE and EPSCoR, to really provide more opportunity to each jurisdiction to really look inward, right? Develop your own unique strengths and respond to your own needs and challenges. We really looked at it that one of the things that's very clear from EPSCoR jurisdictions, and especially the institutions, is really that feeling of networking and bringing individuals together. I think you'll agree that true dynamic science comes out as a result of individuals connecting together. And that really strong position of science is really within that feeling of collaboration. Our hope is that these will position the jurisdiction to be competitive for wider NSF funding beyond EPSCoR. Remember, EPSCoR funding is only 2.7% of the NSF budget. There's a whole 97.3% that you can go after that's really available, and we're excited to give it to you. And the other thing as well that's really special, I think, about EPSCoR is that mechanism for you to develop and respond dynamically over time to the jurisdictional needs in a matrix type strategy. And so what we're hoping is that that'll lead to jurisdictional driven research competitiveness, and thus really working towards what EPSCoR goals are, which we know are the same of yours, and that's building your research competitiveness. So the 2 opportunities, you're aware of these, hopefully already. One of them is EPSCoR RII, which I'll be talking about today. So that's NSF 23587. I encourage you to look that up on Mr. Google and really read through the solicitation. It is a riveting read, trust me. The second one, of course, is the EPSCoR Research Incubators for STEM Excellence RI, or ERISE. This is NSF 23588. I did a previous seminar a couple of weeks ago that's available, I believe, for you. And, if that link can be added to the chat, I'd really appreciate it so folks can sort of check in. Additionally, as well, as I have 2 separate webinars that are available on the EPSCoR site at NSF, just ask NSF EPSCoR, look at those, they're actually up and available. So let's talk about EPSCoR. So EPSCoR's goal is really to respond to the needs of the fundamental needs of the research ecosystem. And the idea is that as we look across EPSCoR as a whole, all the way from Guam to South Carolina to Oklahoma to Tennessee, my goodness, to Montana, we know that your needs are different. right? And so what we're hoping is that EPSCoR allows you to really think about and deeper meaningfully about your fundamental research ecosystem and think about how you can tailor things to what your needs are. So what do I mean by ecosystem? Well, they end up looking something like this. And so what you can see here is there's many players. So if this is the jurisdictional research ecosystem, and this is irrespective of research topic, what you find is it has particular elements to it. Number one is sorry, I have a magic mouse. So every time my finger accidentally flicks across the top, it changes slides. So what you can imagine is that we have the EPSCoR RI investments, things like eRise, Track 2s, Track 4s, all connecting in. We have other NSF center-like activities, regional innovation engines, STCs, STCs, other sorts of activities. And then, of course, we have other research or translational activities that are in the state or nationally that affect Oklahoma. So these could be anything from single investigator awards right up the chain. Additionally, you have other federal infrastructure, right? Knowing that your ecosystem does not just exist on NSF funds, but you have things from NIH, Embry per se, USDA, right? And the large investments that they make, DOE, DOD, NASA, and so forth. On top of that, you end up with your other jurisdictional local sectors. So the first one that we've got to talk about and think about is partnerships, right? Industry partnerships, tribal partnerships, public and private partnerships that exist. And also your state and local resources in terms of governments and legislature and so forth. The other thing that's important is, of course, this also thinks about our academic institutions, whether they're our R1 institutions, our emerging research institutions, our community colleges, or our minority serving institutions. They all play a part in our research infrastructure, as well as, of course, our community stakeholders and public by whom we serve. The other thing that's important as well is we also have our jurisdictional EPSCoR steering committee and our state science and technology plan that plays a role within this ecosystem. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more depth later. So when you think about this ecosystem, what it ends up sort of looking like, you can imagine, is that you have at a very basic level, you have this idea of these fundamental elements that really help drive the research ecosystem irrespective of research topic. So whether you're talking about space weather to the most awesome, I'm a biologist, the most awesome biological research ever, what you can imagine is that requires networks, it requires key administrative support, STEM education, workforce development, broadening participation, the facilities to it, student pathways, community engagement, economic development, partnerships, and so forth. Meanwhile, we also have a sort of above that is the actual specific science and technology labs or networks that we have. So this is where your individual topic comes into play. It might be, for example, in environmental science. It might be in climate research. It might be looking at socioeconomic studies of land use. It might be in string theory, right? Those are the individual topics that sit here. And our expectation now is that EPSCoR can sit there and really work on not necessarily the topics, that's the function of eRise, of Track 2 and so forth, but rather look at this fundamental infrastructure that a state needs to drive the research enterprise. And so what we sort of expect out of this, if you can imagine here's our eRise incubators, the same sort of setup that we had before, is that the EPSCoRs will sit right here in the middle and play the connective tissue that drives all of these systems and helps them work together to help synchromesh the gears, right? That's how we're sort of thinking. And so the other thing as well is in order to do this in a really smart way, what we need to do is we need to continually look in on our ecosystem and understand what the survey of jurisdictional strengths and challenges are, reflect and analyze those, and implement and come up with different strategies, and then implement those strategies as we think about a healthy research ecosystem. And so that's a fundamental tenet of an EPSCoR, is to understand how all of these pieces of the ecosystem fit together. So the EPSCoR RI program aims to support eligible jurisdictions to do three things. Number one, address challenges and opportunities in fundamental research infrastructure specific to the current and evolving needs of the jurisdiction's science and technology research ecosystem. And let me couch that again, that's in terms of the fundamental elements that allow that research ecosystem to go, not topics. Second, build capacity in that fundamental research piece to allow investigator expertise into critical masses, to get them connected and allow them to create effective research and education partnerships and funding. And the last piece, of course, is to develop pathways to broaden the participation of institutions and individuals in the research ecosystem, really providing the elements to allow any individual to take part in the statewide research enterprise. So what are these structure of EPSCoRs? What do they actually look like? Well, number one, a couple of things that are really important is, for the first time, unlike track one, more than one proposal is allowed per jurisdiction. That's exciting, right? The second thing that's even more exciting probably to you is that EPSCoR is willing to fund more than one EPSCoR per jurisdiction. Obviously, this is caveated on our budgets, right? The availability of funds, but this is our intent. The idea of these is these will be funded at $2 million a year for 4 years, and they'll be renewed, providing they do well, at the renewal of $2 million a year for an additional 4 years, depending on your progress. So this gives us a possible total of $16 million per EPSCoR project to build fundamental research infrastructure. These will be monitored through a cooperative agreement. So that's an agreement we're in a partnership between NSF EPSCoR and the jurisdiction. And they will have reverse site visits in year 3 to 4 that is anticipated to be the mechanism to determine whether or not the renewal happens. So a couple of things that are really important is that successful EPSCoR proposals should establish a time-bound, sustainable vision for how your efforts will substantially and holistically enhance research and development competitiveness of the jurisdiction's colleges and universities, including emerging research, ERIs, including two-year institutions, minority serving, and other key players in the ecosystem. They should also create sustainable core efforts that will be continued beyond the award period, include opportunities to reevaluate and develop as the needs of the jurisdiction-wide research ecosystem evolve. So let's sort of put that into practical terms. What does that actually look like? Well, what you'll find is each EPSCoR has 2 major parts. First of all, what we call is an administrative core. And the administrative core's role is really to connect folks together in the jurisdictions to projects or to each other, right? To provide pathways so that any individual or team of individuals or institution or industry piece or whatever, you name it, tribal nation, if they want to engage in the research enterprise that's already present in the state in terms of topics, they have that opportunity. The second thing that's really key about the administrative core is to understand the fundamental needs of the ecosystem, to have that full-blown reflective look and understand what's going on within that particular EPSCoR's sphere of influence and understand what the fundamental needs are. They should be the expert in that area and really have the finger on the pulse of that. And there's going to be a document that's going to be sort of burdened onto the EPSCoR project to help participate in to create the science and technology plan for the jurisdiction. The second part is the additional cores. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. So again, I'm a picture thinker, right? That's just how my brain works. If here on the left, we have the different options that are in the solicitation. On the right, this might be what a potential EPSCoR proposal looks like. It'll have the administrative core, and that's required of everybody. That purpose, again, as we sort of talked about, has several goals, you know, again, about connecting individuals together, broadening participation, connecting folks together in the jurisdiction. So if there's somebody at Outer Mongolian State University of Oklahoma, and they bring in somebody, a new faculty member who is just amazing in a particular topic that's already ongoing, an EPSCoR provides the room to allow that individual to connect to those individuals. Alternatively, of course, they could also bring individuals together in really cool ways. We'll talk about that connective piece in a little bit, about how you might consider doing that. But again, we've left it very open to you to really come up with new, inventive, and exciting ways to do that. The second thing as well is understand the goals, the metrics, and the evaluation. What does the jurisdiction's fundamental research look like, right? Where are the holes? Where are the strengths? right? And really have that finger on the pulse. And what we expect of each EPSCoR, if there's multiple, to really connect with the jurisdictional EPSCoR steering committee, who are also tasked with this sort of idea. And we'll talk about them a little bit more later. We're also working on leadership and communication capacity. We expect there to be a certain amount of leadership and empowerment of individuals, providing opportunities for individuals to lead within your jurisdictions. And then we also want to think about this idea about how to describe how research capacity is being built. And that can also be done, or is expected to be done, through the state science and technology plan. And so the way that you'll do these last sort of three is really through that continual improvement cycle that I spoke about before. So how can the administrative core build partnerships? Well, it's not my place to tell you. I certainly have ideas, but it's up to you to define what you see as useful for your jurisdiction. So the one mechanism we sort of call out in the actual solicitation is you could provide seed funding and workshops, connect individuals to teams, connect teams to teams. And what I've really noticed in a lot of the work that we've done here at NSF is it's really creating opportunities for non-obvious partnerships. That is really where sort of a lot of the magic happens. We have a tendency, I think, as scientists, and I know I was certainly guilty of this, of creating partnerships with obvious partners. Well, this provides opportunities to create new partnerships with non-obvious partners, and that's exciting, right? And so this connective role that I spoke about before, this is really what we're looking at. You know, if there's folks in community colleges and connecting to industry, that would be huge. If there are opportunities to connect the USDA or the NIFA work or the work with Embry to some of the work that's going on here, you have our permission to do that, right? It's about connectivity to build your research capacity as a whole and bring humans together in productive and cool ways. So what will an EPSCoR look like? The other part of it is that as you go through and you look at your jurisdictional needs, challenges, and strengths, right? What we can do, excuse me, in the solicitation is we also presented a list of different research support of different cores. So this is like a smorgasbord. And so each one of these is sort of defined in the solicitation, but they're really loose. Don't take those the way that we define them in the solicitation. These were just things that we thought about. We even have, believe it or not, an other core that you can define any way you want to give you an idea of sort of where we're sending you. But these were fundamental elements that we've seen at EPSCoR and coming from many track 1 and track 2 projects that we saw were things that you really have focused on in the past. And so we just called them out in the solicitation. So they're nowhere near an exhaustive list, but they're where we're starting. And we anticipate there'll be more to come as these solicitations evolve over time. So what you'll do is, after looking at your jurisdictional needs, strengths, and challenges, what you may identify as a jurisdiction that say, you really think our EPSCoR is really in a position to really move the needle in broadening participation and research support. The number of cores is not in any way fixed in stone. I picked 2 because I like the number 2. 1 is so lonely and 3 is a crowd. But what you could do is, depending on what you decide to do and how you define and allocate your budget, you may focus on any number of cores, right? And again, it's up to you to sell it to the reviewers as to why you've made the choices you've made. We do not have any predetermined pieces in our minds here at NSF. So, for example, this particular jurisdiction, they decided to work on broadening participation. They just figured it was an issue and they really wanted to allow that to happen. And they also decided to include research support. And of course, what they're going to do is they're going to define that on, I'll just flick slides. And so what they do is that the decision to which cores they decide on are based on demonstrable research capacity needs in the jurisdiction. This could be linking it to the state science and technology plan. It might be based on statistics that you find and really add it to your add credence to your request, right, or to your rationale. It's really up to you. And so what you've got to do is really provide that justifiable and data-driven rationale for why you're choosing what you choose. And so that's really important. And the other thing that's really important is that, as I stated before, there's no focus from our end on the number of cores you select, and projects should really focus on depth rather than breadth on the actual selection of cores. And so as you think through what your core looks like and as it develops, the thing that I encourage you to really think about is think about what are the metrics that will show success. What will be the piece that you know that that particular core is done? What are the methods to sustainability for the activities that you associate with that core that can be continued on to perpetuity, right? What are the things that are going to move the needle? How are you going to measure it? And how are they going to become sustainable because they are important? Those are the kinds of questions you really want to think about and really want to ask. So I can't really go any further without talking about the role of the jurisdictional EPSCoR steering committee. And, we've in a lot of discussions we've had with many of you in that since May is really defining what that role looks like. And I don't think it's NSF's role or the stance we've taken is we don't think it's NSF's role to prescribe. Rather, what we've done, because each jurisdiction is very different, when we compare Guam and Virgin Islands to South Carolina, you can imagine the makeup and what that EPSCoR steering committee looks like will be different for each individual jurisdiction based on its strengths, needs, and challenges. So what we've done is we've really redefined the role of what the state EPSCoR steering committee is. And we also have in the works opportunities to help you provide guidance and get all the jurisdictions together to really think about what these look like. So don't worry, there's more stuff coming down the pipe. So the role is really redefined. And what you think about is that the membership should be really unique to the jurisdiction and defined by you as to what it looks like. So that what happens is when you think about what an effective EPSCoR steering committee would look like, you notice that they play several roles. Number one is they play a key role in connecting entities beyond traditional NSF's research. The EPSCoRs themselves will only have a sphere of influence over NSF-related activities. But your EPSCoR jurisdiction and your EPSCoR research, your research enterprise is so much more than that. And so the EPSCoR steering committee provides key ways to be able to connect into those different places to increase your sphere of influence across different sectors and entities that exist within the research ecosystem. Second thing, and to do that, you're going to have both a wide and a diverse membership. And what we've done is we've no longer really defined membership, right? So we've really loosened those rules so to better suit the needs, the specific needs of your jurisdiction, of Oklahoma in this case. The second thing we've done is we've also charged them to work in a co-productive manner, to work with the EPSCoRs and others, I'll talk about who the others are in a minute, to really understand what the dynamic ecosystem or the research ecosystem looks like, to provide connections to develop where appropriate, where they're missing, and also to really think about what that assessment and identification of research strengths, challenges, and barriers. And then so what happens, the resulting thing that comes out of that work is the science and technology plan. So rather than becoming a document that really, in some cases, was tailored around the next track one project, what these documents can become is now this document that provides this holistic view on the state of the research ecosystem in the jurisdiction, and that becomes powerful. The other thing as well is we're also recognizing that this amount of work is increasing. We're also requiring up to 5%. You can add more if you want. We put 5% in, at least 5%, allocating towards these types of activities. So when we imagine it, we can imagine if we look at our ecosystem, and what I've done is I've moved the jurisdictional steering committee down here as a co-productive entity. And who does that co-production is really defined by the jurisdiction. But what you can imagine is that the folks in the EPSCoR may have a sphere of influence over a number of people. So what happens, these partnerships pieces can start to coalesce together, right, and provide feedback to the EPSCoR RI. But you can see here that there's some elements that the EPSCoR just isn't able to connect to. So what you could imagine is the EPSCoR RI may have spheres of influence with these folks, but the jurisdictional EPSCoR steering committee can provide a much wider spread over folks that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. And that's how we envision that they will work together to help develop this wonderful science and technology plan. And so this is what you can see here, is that our view now on the state science and technology plans has changed. It's now this living document. That's how we envision it. And it identifies this sort of soup to nuts view of the strengths, the needs, the challenges in the jurisdiction-wide ecosystem. And as a result of that, it identifies priorities. So what that can do is it identifies priorities at two separate levels: fundamental research infrastructure, and then opportunities to build research strength in particular areas. And what we've done is we're providing startup funds, if you will, right, through EPSCoR to address those fundamental research infrastructure challenges, or to strengthen specific areas of research through eRISE, and start to create that pipeline to be able to develop the base research infrastructure to move you into a position where you're far more research competitive at the end of those particular projects. So what does renewal look like? Well, by the end of year 3, the EPSCoR project will demonstrate evidence of growing networks across the jurisdiction. And I stole this actually from a random Track 2 report showing how their network of researchers has increased over time. The second one is the continued analysis of the jurisdictional research ecosystem as it develops, and thus, therefore, the actual science and technology plan as it's developing in real time. And you can imagine, after, say, 10 years of this, you will have a living history of how your research infrastructure has built and demonstratably built over time. That becomes such a powerful history of documentation for your jurisdiction and the development of your jurisdiction. The other thing as well is a criterion for success of renewal funding is also to secure additional funding to continue development and implementation of successful programs. One of the things that's really important is that there is, and if you check, we have a DCL out on this, telling you about what the actual, or sort of the start of a match funding would look like. This is one way to actually develop match funding, right? Again, the renewal will be part of a reverse site visit or site visit. And again, we're building these into a solicitation that will provide more clarity relatively soon, within the next year. It's my job after the current job, if you get my meaning. So what might an EPSCoR renewal look like? Well, now we're 4 years down the road. So of course, you've gone in and you've thought about what your jurisdictional needs, challenges, and strengths are. And what you may determine is that you have achieved your metrics and milestones to put in sponsored research officers in every single institution in the state. You've done that. That is checked off. Good on you. You've done it. It's sustainable. And so what that does is that provides you with the ability to now choose the next thing on your list and add that in and build on that for the next 4 years. And so what you see is you can dynamically work your system to develop and build and grow over the 8 years of the award. All of this, of course, as I've stated multiple times already, is really based on total process improvement, really looking inward and providing that honest view. And we've provided, I hope, enough sort of push to really make you think about these in this holistic fashion. The other thing that's really important is that we know that it's going to look different for different jurisdictions. That's why we've kept it sort of very loose. And so really, you know, as you think about what's needed in your particular jurisdiction, Oklahoma, think about what the capacity is, think about what the need is, the impact and the accountability, and seat what you do in data-based evidence. That's really important. So a couple of things that are really important, and I want to emphasize this. We will accept and consider for funding any number of proposals in a given jurisdiction, and we will base that and seat any decisions in merit review criteria. Okay, and so we'll talk about what those criteria are as we go. But the thing that I want to really emphasize is that it is no longer a requirement that any EPSCoR proposal go through a state committee. Right? These may be, every single institution is eligible to submit an EPSCoR in the state. Now, what our envisionment is that more successful proposals will be ones that work together within the ecosystem. So coordinating through your state office is absolutely encouraged, but not required. Okay, what your burden is as you're developing these is to really talk about and link it to what statewide priorities are. Best way through the state office. However, if you don't, that is also okay, as long as you seek that within the needs of the jurisdiction, and usually S&T plan, but we know in the first couple of years, it will be based on data as the science and technology plans evolve to where we need them to be. So to be eligible to compete for an EPSCoR, you got to be in an EPSCoR jurisdiction. You've got to be from an institution organization that either is in the 5th or final year of a track 1, and that you're in, or if you're currently not involved in a track 1, you are actually eligible to apply in the December and following August competitions. Right. So if you're currently involved in a track 1, you have to wait until that track 1 cycles out, until that sunsets. If your institution, if you're on this call and you're from an institution that is currently not involved in that track 1, that's the institution. So i.e. you are not, your institution is not on the list of participating organizations. You are eligible to apply right now. You have to have an active jurisdictional steering committee with current bylaws to support STEM research. Again, we expect these will be evolving. As long as you have one right now, and every EPSCoR jurisdiction has one right now, you're good. And you also need to have a jurisdictional science and technology plan that's been accepted and approved by the jurisdiction. Again, we understand that these are going to be evolving over time, right? So, yep, we've talked about that. The next point down. The only other thing is that you may be a lead. Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So if you meet the previous criteria, there is no limit on the number of proposals that may come in from a particular jurisdiction. Additionally, your institution or organization may only lead on a single EPSCoR, right? So if you're at Oklahoma State, you may lead on a single EPSCoR, but you may be involved as a subaward or as a collaborator, depending on the mechanism, on any number of EPSCoRs, okay? But you may only lead in one active or in the competition. Additionally, if you apply for an E-Rise, each institution, so like Oklahoma State, say, you may lead on both an EPSCoR and an E-Rise, but that would be the limit. PIs, you need to be affiliated and employed by an active organization in EPSCoR jurisdiction, and each institution or organization must be represented by a PI or at least one co-PI. The number of proposals per PI, you may be PI or co-PI on a single EPSCoR and a single E-Rise, but you may not be a PI or co-PI on multiple E-Rises or multiple EPSCoRs, if you get it, but you may be one on both, right? An EPSCoR and an E-Rise, but not 2 E-Rises and not 2 EPSCoRs. I think that's clear. The thing that's really important is that when you think about an EPSCoR, it's about the jurisdiction. And so if you're doing anything for the jurisdiction, you cannot do it just from a single institution. They have to be multi-organizational, right? And really, you know, we're encouraging to really think about what's going to be the most effective team to achieve the goals that you want to do within that. We're also encouraging the lead institution, or at least one collaborative partner, to be an emerging research institution or minority serving institution. Again, I've had many conversations over the past few months with primarily undergraduate institutions who are considering putting these EPSCoRs in. We are totally encouraging that. We are excited. Bring them on. Okay, it's exciting. The second thing as well is that you really need, in terms of bring in other collaborators, both internationally, non-EPSCoR and EPSCoR collaborators, you may do that. But if they're international or non-EPSCoR, they must be as an unfunded participant or unfunded collaborator. If they're from an EPSCoR jurisdiction and you can demonstrate that the thing that they bring is critical to the needs of your jurisdiction and your project, i.e. the benefit is heavily in your favor, they may be a funded collaborator. So that's only from another EPSCoR jurisdiction. Make sense? So if they're from a non-EPSCoR state or international, they may be an unfunded collaborator. If they're from an EPSCoR jurisdiction, they may be a funded collaborator, but you need to demonstrate that what they bring to the table is fundamentally critical to your jurisdiction. The benefit should be for Oklahoma's, or for Oklahoma, good England there. So a couple of myth-busting things, you know, I have a program at my university that I want to build. Will I be competitive? No. All EPSCoR projects are set to build jurisdiction-wide infrastructure and should be seated firmly and unequivocally within the context of the jurisdictional research fundamental research infrastructure needs. Another one that I've heard down the road is only R1s or big universities can lead. No, we're encouraging submissions to be led from all kinds of institutions and organizations. We are so excited about these opportunities, providing pathways for these institutions to lead. I have a ton of institutions, and I want to include them, but there's not enough space on the cover sheet, right? It only provides space for one PI and 4 co-PIs. This is why we've provided the mechanism to submit as a collaborative proposal, which provides more than enough opportunities, actually infinite number of opportunities for you to be able to build those folks as co-PIs. My jurisdiction is submitting many EPSCoR proposals. Will I even be considered? Our official line is all proposals will be measured and considered for an award based on NSF merit review process according to the criteria expressed in the solicitation. What I encourage you to do, and this is just, my advice, is to really, if you're considering submitting multiple EPSCoR proposals as a jurisdiction, get together and work it out in a logical way as to what the order might be. What makes the most sense to maximize your efforts and the jurisdiction's efforts for success? And the same goes for ERISE as well. The more you talk, there is no way anyone can say no that you can't submit, but you get a lot further by having discussions about what, where, how, and how you can work together. This is your opportunity for leadership and change from a no-or mentality to a yes-and mentality. And that will become powerful over the next few years as these develop. So the thing that becomes important is, in addition to intellectual merit, right? Intellectual merit is about how cool the idea is, right? And whether or not you can do it with the money you've got, the people you've got, and the time that you've got. And then broader impacts, okay, which is how cool the science is and what its potential impact to society is, right? Is in addition to those criteria that all NSF awards or NSF proposals are weighed and measured by, you're also measured by 3 additional ones. The first one is the connection and potential impact of the project to both the jurisdictional needs and the research capacity, as well as EPSCoR's mission and goals. The second thing that we're going to be asking all reviewers to weigh very carefully is the diversity and culture of inclusion of different institution types and sectors within these projects. Are you looking at the entire ecosystem? And number 3 is, what's your project management, leadership, and partnerships? What do they look like to build that fundamental research infrastructure? Because that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. And we're excited to really think about these and see what your responses are as you all think deeply about these. The time frame, EPSCoR NSF 23587, that deadline is coming up excitingly fast. The full proposals will be due December 6, 2023. If you need to sort of need a little bit of extra time, we also have a second round coming in July 9th, 2024. And what will happen is from then on, they will be due a once a year opportunity, due the second Tuesday in July thereafter. Another thing that's important to note is that we're anticipating these particular projects, the turnaround on these will fall within the 6-month dwell time at NSF. These are not the scale of track 1 proposals. And so we have the ability to be able to turn these around much quicker to you, so you get feedback in a much more timely fashion compared to how it used to be. And we're excited to help you with that. Stay tuned. There are frequently answered questions out and published online. Do check those out. But also, I'm open to meet with jurisdictions. Quite frankly, for me personally, I am meeting with individual teams probably about 2 to 3 a day right now and talking about these, as well as receiving many, many emails from you. Keep it coming. It really warms the cockles of my heart to know that you're thinking about these opportunities and thinking about them seriously and real. The second thing is we also set up a couple of email addresses that you can contact us directly, EPSCoR@nsf.gov and EPSCoRRISE@nsf.gov. So please reach out to us, right, as we go. And also thank you to Oklahoma for organizing this event. This is exactly what we're hoping for. And really, what we need you to do is really spread your word in the jurisdiction, right? These are new, cool, and exciting opportunities. Make connections now. Revisit your jurisdiction's EPSCoR steering committees. Revisit your S&T plans. And above all else, reach out to us, reach out to each other, and reach out within the projects to really to your external teams to really think about how you can do the best for Oklahoma and your own state's research infrastructure and develop those plans that moves your state forward for the next 40 years. We're excited to be a partner in this. And with that, I'll sort of stop here, turn off the presentation, and be open for questions. And I'd like to thank you for sitting with me for the last sort of the last couple of minutes. So anyway, I'll stop the share here. Thanks very much. Oh, yay, my favorite question. So there's a question about RI Track 2. Those of you who know, I was the lead on RI Track 2 for many years. There is nothing changing about Track 2 to my understanding. So it will remain as that key fundamental way for you to build capacity across teams, across multiple jurisdictions. And that we recognize that as a critical and important strategy of NSF EPSCoR to really build capacity. So we do not anticipate that changing other than the topic as it always has. And we're going through internal discussions right now to get that topic out to you. So watch that space.
So my question is about...
hang on, actually, Babu actually had his hand up first.
Yes, please. My question is, can you little more elaborate on single proposal or collaborative proposal? What does it mean?
Yeah, sure. So that's exciting, right? So what you'll find is that a single proposal with multiple institutions is what we call a prime award with sub-awards. So what would happen is that the award would be made as a single award to the home institution, to the prime institution, and they would be responsible for managing all of the sub-awards, right? And there's certain advantages to that, right? It creates sort of a pyramid. It's a little bit easier to manage from a single PI point of view. However, what we find is that these are difficult to manage for institutions that have like smaller capacity, like, for example, in sponsored research offices or in terms of just financial infrastructure. And so the other way that we provided to increase the opportunity for everybody to participate is also the idea of collaborative awards. So what these are is that you would still have a lead institution. So I'm going to use this finger here because it's longer, right? So this would still be the lead institution. They would submit the prime proposal, but then each other connecting institution here and here would submit their own budget. They would submit their own, CVs and so forth. And what would happen is that those would then be separate awards. So each one of them would actually receive a separate award for their part of the project. Does that make sense? But they would still submit a single, every year they would still submit a single annual report, and that just gets clipped onto everybody and so forth. And so what it does is that means that each institution has its own PI, quote unquote. They receive their own thing, and how that would show up. And so when you look at like Oklahoma's Track 1, it shows up as a single award, and you don't see the collaborators getting money. This would show up as individual proposals with all the collaborators getting money. So that's just a slightly different mechanism, and they all manage their own budgets and get provided opportunities to be, to provide leadership, in some ways.
Thank you.
Okay, this time, Chi, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I get in trouble if I don't, it's like lines at an airport, people get angry if they push in.
Yeah, thank you for your kind explanation. And then I have another question like eligibility.
Yeah.
So my institution will become eligible from the July of 2024. So is it okay to apply submission the second deadline?
So actually, wait a minute, let me just ask, Val's on the phone. Val, when does Oklahoma's Track 1 finish?
So that is June 30th of 2025.
Yeah, so that means you'll be eligible not this year, but next year, if you're in the Track 1, if your institution's involved in the Track 1. So it wouldn't be these 2 rounds, it'd be the following year. Right? Have I got that right? Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
So you'll be 24. Once they enter their 5th year, then you're eligible.
And then regardless of having LII track 2, right?
I'm sorry?
Regardless of LII track 2.
What do you mean lists?
Regardless. So
Oh, yeah,
if I have
yeah,
a
completely separate. Yeah,
yes,
no. If you have a track 2, that's just doing its chestnut, that's doing its thing. You are eligible to apply for an RII track 1, for an EPSCoR or an eRISE. Yeah, that we've kept that separation still.
sounds good. Thank you so much.
Any other questions, or have I answered absolutely everything? Are you excited? Here we go. Here's a question that came in. To what extent should universities' senior leaders, provosts, VPRs, etc., be involved in project leadership? Is there an expectation for not including these individuals on the project management / leadership teams? Fantastic question, Katie. And I'm going to give you the best non-answer ever. It's really about, you've got to think about what makes your project successful. And so, depending on what your views are towards sustainability, that may require buy-in from senior leadership, right? So I would recommend at the very least that you have their buy-in. Whether or not you make them partners in the project, and notice the word I'm using is partners in the project, is really up to you and what you see and identify as the best interests of that project. Right? If you're looking towards building this into, like, you can imagine an EPSCoR potentially, if you're looking at SODL research, really looking at K through 12 or something like that, or if I switch to an eRISE real quick, you're looking at building that into an ERC or STC, or you're looking at building an STC out of some EPSCoR activities, which could completely happen. It is best to get buy-in from your senior leadership now to help them know that that's your intention, to be able to put the chess pieces in place to actually actuate that in the long term. But it's really your call, depending on what you're deciding to do. From another question just popped up. Current track 1 utilize an external evaluator, in our case KSU OEIE. Will there be a continued need for an external evaluator? If so, does the EPSCoR house it for the whole jurisdiction? So yes is the answer. Evaluation is a critical and important role. And how you use that evaluation is going to be up to you. The way that we've described it is it's an independent evaluator, so they've just got to be independent from the project, but they absolutely should be in there. The evaluator, part of their role is to work with the EPSCoR project. And remember that EPSCoR's project, within the scope that you write it, will play a role in the ecosystem. So yes, in a way, they will be important to help work with the entire jurisdiction. But what you can imagine is as multiple EPSCoRs come online, each with their own individual scopes, you can imagine those evaluators working together within their sphere of influence of that EPSCoR to actually think about what that looks like, right? And as you're developing, we're part of this a workshop that we're developing is looking at 3 major things. Number 1, what your science and technology committees look like. Number 2, what the S&T plan, 4 things, what the S&T plan looks like, and how you're evaluating and what the role of the state officers are really in that evaluation, and what does that look like for different jurisdictions. So yeah. Hopefully I've answered that. I think so. The next question is, will the evaluators serve the EPSCoR, or will they also evaluate any eRISE projects? So eRISEs are going to be required to have their own evaluators as well. Okay. So, so each EPSCoR will have an evaluator, each eRISE will have an evaluator. If you want to mandate that they're all the same as part of your internal discussions within your state, that's your prerogative. If they're different, that is also your prerogative. Any others? Oh my goodness, I may finish this early. I never finish these early. That never, I should have talked longer in my talk. Oh, goody, yay. On reporting, the state office coordinates now. How will that work in the future? So what's going to happen here is that we have now the eDocs system that's up and running, but that evaluation will come in from each award, right? And so when you look at it, the track 1s really only evaluated the track 1 project, right? we envision exactly the same thing happening, is that each EPSCoR will report on that EPSCoR project, right? So it's not doing that. And then what's going to happen is the full-blown state connection is going to be happening through the state science and technology plan that coordinates it together. Okay, so this is how we sort of see that building as you work on what your ecosystem looks like. But in terms of requirements, NSF has always only had the ability to actually request reporting that looks like your particular, your track one, which was of course very limited within that scope of that particular project and that particular topic, and therefore never really captured the entire state ecosystem, right? Any other questions? No. So, do look out. I just finished the contract writing up for this workshop. We're hoping that it's going to be providing we can get it through our systems. We're really excited to really open up conversations about these really deep, dark, and tricky topics of EPSCoR and how these things are connected and that connective tissue. At the PI meeting coming up in May, look out, there's going to be several online opportunities for people to have a say, a work, and to really think about what the challenges are. And the most exciting thing for me intellectually is there is no right answer, right? And really thinking deeply about what matters to your particular jurisdiction is going to be really important and really critical over time. And so we're excited to have those conversations. It'll provide the starting point for those conversations, but moreover, provide additional opportunities as time goes on to allow you to have further those conversations as well, because we know that this is something that we're in it for the long term, and we're excited to be your partners in it for the long term. Okay, and with that, I guess if there's no other questions, I think we're done. I'm just checking with Kaylee here, the boss, to make sure that she's good.
I don't see any other questions, so I think, yeah, at this time we'll give everybody a couple minutes back in their day. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you JD for presenting on this. This is exciting, and we're excited to see where this leads.
Yeah, thank you to all of you. I really appreciate you all being here.